Can you hear me at the back? I do hope so. Woo! Brothers and sisters, I had the misfortune to attend Sefton Council's meeting on Thursday evening. I've had to write this down because I don't want to miss anything out. I witnessed the Labour and Tory councillors colluding to stop a very, very clear motion which called on the council for an immediate, permanent ceasefire in Gaza, the rest of Palestine and Israel, to resume the peace process, which included upholding of humanitarian law and condemn the death and destruction in Gaza. The motion itself was to be sent to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer. When I looked down in that gallery, I thought I was in a zoo. I thought I was in a nightmare. It was like a cesspit of snakes, that's all I can tell you. A watered down version was then put forward by the Labour group. It was much less effective and avoided the real issue, that the Gazan people have been subject to genocide by the Israelis, and that is continuing. We can see genocide taking place, but our leaders nationally, internationally and locally still fail and refuse to acknowledge this. The motion that was eventually passed ignored the upholding of humanitarian law and asked for humanitarian aid, not humanitarian law. It did not condemn the death and destruction in Gaza. They changed the wording of that to they regretted the death and destruction. Regretted. They may as well have said they were disappointed about the death and destruction in Gaza. It went nowhere near hard enough. They also removed the resumption of the peace process. What this meant then was that you had a very less effective, weak and significantly emotion, and the Labour Party avoided that. They avoided Keir Starmer having to defend his and his party's position on supporting Israel and Netanyahu. It was an absolute disgrace, and it won't be forgotten, because he's never going to be made to feel accountable to his Labour Party councillors in Sefton. And we are here ourselves. We've been watching the TV. We see the daily avoidance of the real issues. We've seen the drones coming in and bombing children who are playing in the streets, bombing hospitals, Israeli soldiers taking pot shots as if they're in a circus at anyone they like. They ignored the attacks this week on the West Bank and in Rafah. We saw the leaders of the Western world very, very quick to condemn Iran for sending drones and missiles to Israel. But why did they send the drones and the missiles to Israel? Because Israel bombed the Iranian embassy in the first place and killed 16 of their citizens, and that's why there was a retaliation, and there was nothing at all from our leaders about condemning that. We have to stand with our brothers and sisters internationally and in Palestine. We have now got to start calling out those spineless Labour councillors and MPs who support their ringmaster, Keir Starmer, because it's nothing but a circus and he is the ringmaster. These are councillors who are too afraid to stand up because they're too afraid to break their whip and they'll be kicked out. We have to call out and name and shame them, but actually there was too many of them for me to write it all down. They will do anything to protect their own personal seats and protect Keir Starmer and his wholehearted support for Israel. Make no mistake, they need to be accountable and answerable. How can Keir Starmer defend his Zionist position? Because all he said is that he carries on supporting Israel. Brothers and sisters, we stand with our brothers in Palestine and internationally. It was what the Labour movement in this country used to be and it used to do. And make no mistake, Keir Starmer wants to destroy the international working solidarity that we have with people here and abroad. I will finish by saying now that there were a number of councillors in that chamber who had the moral compass, dignity and integrity. And I'll name those councillors. Natasha Carlin, who was a Labour MP, a Labour councillor, who has now gone independent. Sean Halsall, who was also a Labour councillor, who is now standing and as an independent. And Andy Wilson, also a long-standing councillor, who is now independent. They were sick to their back teeth of seeing what was happening in the council and what was happening in the government. They may have come a little bit late to the table, but they're here and we should welcome them. I also want to recognise there were a number of independent Liberal Democrats there. John Pugh, Ian Brodie Brown, Leo Evans, Sinclair Albuquerque, Lim Thompson, John Dodd and Simon Shaw. I'm not ashamed to say that on the way home from that meeting, I cried in the car when I saw the treachery that these people will do to stay in power. I cried for Gaza. I cried for the 17,000 children who have been killed. 17,000 killed children who never had a gun in their hands and they were slaughtered. 17,000 children. People should remember that. 25,000 children who have been left with no parents. There is nothing left. There is nothing that they won't do. I'll carry on crying, but I'll carry on demonstrating, because there's nothing more important at the moment than the issue in Palestine. There is a genocide going on that we can't ignore. But we have to stay strong. We have to stay united. We don't just call for an immediate permanent ceasefire. We called for an end to the apartheid regime which has been going on in Palestine by the Israelis for the last, not since 1948, but for the last 200 years. We're calling for an end to apartheid and an end to occupation. And let's stop saying settlers. They're invaders. That's what they are. They're not settlers. Okay? They're not settlers. Settlers sounds fairly respectable. Let's call it for what they are. They are illegal occupiers and they are illegal murdering thieves. Okay. So we call for an end to the occupation that's there. That we will not give up because we're here. And when this is over, we will still be here because we want an end to the occupation, justice for the Palestinians and end to apartheid. Thank you, comrades.